Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, council, staff, and for those of you that are joining us virtually, welcome back, Councillor Basie. A reminder for those in attendance to ensure your communication devices are either shut off or on vibrate, please. This evening, we acknowledge that this land on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Shinabig. It is through the connection of the Shinabig with the spirit of the land, water, and air that we recognize their unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together, as treaty people, we have shared responsibility to act with respect for the environment, sustains all life, protecting the future for those generations to come. Council would ask if you have a pecuniary interest to declare it at the appropriate time. Clerk, do we have any delegations this evening?
Nothing this evening.
All right. Item 5, any business arising from the previous meeting?
Nothing has come forward.
Okay, we're gonna go to item 6, 6.1.
Yep.
A motion by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by Councillor Van Claveren. That the report by Ken Melanson, Manager Planning and Development Services, dated July 24th, 2023, regarding the exemption from part lot control be received, and that bylaw 77 of 2023 be taken as read 3 times and finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the said bylaw accordingly. Council, you've had an opportunity to review Mr. Melanson's report. Mr. Melanson, is there, before I go to council, if there's any questions, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Self-explanatory.
Council, any questions for Mr. Melanson? Hearing none, call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Council now take you to 6.2. Short-term rentals update next steps. I have motion by Councillor Vacy, seconded by Councillor Wolfett, that the report by Randy Burke, planner, dated July 17th, 2023, regarding short-term rentals update and next steps be received, and staff be instructed to proceed as presented. Now, I understand there were several that were not able to get this report. It didn't come through. I know I, for one, did not get it. Did everybody else get a copy of it? It came through under the. Okay. Ms. Burke, could you give us a brief rundown on that, please?
Yeah, so thank you, Your Worship. Within the report, we just outlined what staff has been doing in terms of public engagement. So we outlined that there was a survey done from April 3rd to May 31st, in which that received about 219 responses. We had 2 sessions at like lunchtime one and an evening one on June 20th, and there was about 35 individuals there. And this report was written on July 17th, so there wasn't any information for our July 18th open house, but I can report that we had about 32 people there show up. So the report is just kind of addressing what would be next for staff with council's direction, of course. We're proposing that we provide council with a full overview of our findings from these open houses at next month's planning council meeting. This provides some time to go over the open house that was just went on as well. And then with that, when the engagement feedback is provided, the next step would really be to provide a very preliminary bylaw, if that is what we are directed to do, essentially, and with that will come a formal public meeting. So that's really what the report highlighted.
Okay. Is there any questions? Councilor Wolfett?
Not trying to pin you down your numbers, but the 2 meetings you had there a week ago or whatever, was that a total of 32 at both meetings or at each meeting?
No, it's total, sorry.
Total at both meetings, okay. The only other, well, I might as well say it, I got approached here the other day that I don't know what come out of your meeting or wherever that, but there are some people already up in arms saying that we've been told there's going to be $1,000 license fee. And what I said to them was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong right now, I said, I have not heard that whatsoever. I do not believe that statement was made from anybody from here, because we don't know. We don't know. We haven't got any reports or anything, but two people approached me on that, so I don't know where it comes from, whether somebody started a rumor or whatever, just so you know that.
So through your worship, I'll address it because it did come up in the last open house meeting. And there was a discussion we had with a number of landowners about licensing and the cost of enforcement and how enforcement would be paid for. So we started talking about with them how Lambton Shores operates with a cost recovery model for enforcement. And part of that discussion was to say, look, we don't know how this would work. We don't know if a licensing system is going to be part of the approach. If it is, it'll depend on what council wants to do in terms of how that's going to get paid for. If it's cost recovery, we have to keep in mind that we have a smaller level of activity here in terms of short-term vacation rentals than say Lambton Shores. So they can charge, a certain amount, and that can cost recover because based on the number that they have, it pays for that staff member. We have far less. So likely the fee would be higher because proportionately, if you, let's say Lambton Shores has 100 and you guys have 10, well, you've got to charge 10 times more because you have 10 times less. And that was the debate. And what we said to folks was, look, we're not even at that point yet. We need to report back to council and we need to get direction on where they want us to go before we even get to a point of setting a fee, because that gets into the conversation of, well, are there enough rental units that would apply to this that would even cost recover the whole operation? Or would council want to approach it in the perspective of, well, we'll try to break it down into the tax rate for now, but then as time passes, we'll move more towards cost recovery. There were a whole number of options that could happen. So we were just trying to give those particular residents involved in the conversation a picture of how things could play out, but heavily caveated on the fact that we have no direction from council as to what that future is going to look like. And just for the sake of council to understand, there were a couple of folks who attended who did feel that that direction and future path had already been decided because of the way the boards were asking questions about certain types of regulations. So we did have to spend a bit of time with some folks saying, no, it's not been laid out yet. We're asking you, if council goes this direction, what would you want to see if part of the regulation included doing X or Y or Z?
So I can see where this $1,000 would have come from, because people add 2 and 2 and they soon go to the site up there and Lambton Shores, or what are they charging? So I could see how that rumor could start. But anyways, I tried to squash it, but for now. The other part, if you don't mind, in your report, you get down to the strategic plan part of it. And I was just wondering what you're getting at here, because you're talking about to encourage tourism and your planning policy for a variety of housing forms, medium term, the whole list of stuff there. What's the purpose for that in this report?
So they're located through the iCompass. They're there. So I just wanted to highlight any strategic plan that may come throughout this process that was provided to me. In terms of tourism, short-term rentals do, it is a positive impact that we have seen the public say throughout the open houses, that it does provide tourism, and frankly, based on that specific one, it would be through multiple different housing forms potentially. So I just wanted to highlight kind of what could come about this in terms of long-term and short-term of the options that were kind of presented.
Just to add to that, your worship, it's linking back the idea of short-term vacation rentals to your most recent strategic plan. So I believe, and maybe the clerk or the deputy CEO can confirm this, that you are either embarking on or have started a new strategic plan for this new session of council. All that we're doing in the report is referring back to the most recent strategic plan and how this would relate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Van Clever, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm just looking forward to the next report. I think that'll give us a lot of indication. Could you give us a hint, maybe a feel of where people are at?
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of how we went about the public engagement. So the survey was really to just figure out our regulations, kind of something the public might want, what type of dwellings, how many short-term rental owners are there? So it was relatively broad. The majority were in favor of regulations within the survey. And then once we got to the open houses, we kind of tried to, kind of like a funnel, we brought to the open houses ideas and themes that had come out throughout the survey instead of in terms of noise and parking, kind of issues that had mainly come up. And we tried to see what was really important to regulate. So main themes included regulating noise, parking, short-term rental occupancy, potentially regulating the zoning, things of that sort, or use, so residential use specifically. And then within the last open house, we kind of provided some potential policies if we were to go that route of what could kind of mitigate these issues that wanted to be regulated. So and really, we just said, do you agree, yes or no? Please provide us any comments. So that way, when we do kind of come back with all the information, we can provide, as in-depth public engagement as we could have gotten to. But there is a lot of 50-50 and a lot of questions. The majority who did come to the open houses were either individuals who live next to short-term rentals or short-term rental owners. So you very much see that within the findings. I haven't done the previous one. I just did a really brief look this morning, so I could provide any information, but yeah, it is there. The majority did say regulations would be a positive thing, but how they're regulated in terms of more restrictive, less restrictive is still we'll see once this last open house really would have dived into that. And in terms of noise, a lot of people think that they should be restrictive, but in terms of occupancy, you kind of see a different response.
Thank you. That's all for me, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Deputy?
How many people actually were against them completely? Like, of the responses that you did get?
I'd have to double check that because it would have been within the survey. I know the vast majority, like it was a high majority that wanted short-term rental regulations, but I can get you
No,
that.
I'm saying that didn't want involved, like to prohibit them.
Oh, we did ask that within the open house, the June 20th open house. And there were a handful, not necessarily a significant amount in terms of if I'm thinking data. So, but I can provide you that number once I go through the boards.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, pardon me, Deputy Mayor, through you, your worship. When we got to the second open house, there was no specific question about, do you want them prohibited? But we did have a number of individuals who came forward and said, well, why was I not asked if I didn't want this? And we had to explain to them that we had already asked that question in the previous one. So it was an iterative process. But what we did say to them was, we had one last board that was additional comments. So put it on a sticky note and put it on the board. So what we did in that particular instance, because of the two different meetings, was if we found that there were a number of comments that were repeated over and over, we were stacking them one on top of the other. So I wouldn't be surprised if, something along the lines of, I don't want any of these, had a few stacked on top of each other from the last one, but it was not a specific question in the last one.
Councilor Rodriguez, any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Well, really just a comment, I guess. I'm glad you mentioned about the different cost aspects of this, simply because, like you said, Lambton Shores has, maybe 300 to 500 and we have 50 something. And how does that become cost effective? Because I don't believe people really think of it in those terms too. And I think it's important, if they understood your taxes are going to go up to, implement regulations on 50 cottages versus, you know what I mean? Versus getting that cost recovery, and if it becomes $1,000 per cottage, then what are we saying we're closed for business? So there's kind of a balance there. So I think it's important, and I almost wish it was. And talked about it both open houses just for consistency with the two different, you know, you could have had different demographics in one versus the other.
And through your worship, keep in mind that you, depending on whether you take an off ramp to this process and decide you don't want to continue to move forward, and we stop, which means we don't enact any legislation at all, status quo remains. If we are directed to provide a bylaw for consideration, there's still a public meeting that's required. So there's still more to it. And what we were trying to do through this process was create sort of an iterative process to say, well, do you want them? And if so, you know, to what extent? And then here's the next open house that's kind of the next stepping stone. And then here's the next open house that's the next stepping stone, because it doesn't really make any sense to go back out twice asking the same questions. We wanted to try to engage in a different way in terms of, well, here's what we talked about at this open house. Okay, now based on that, here's where we could think about regulation and licensing if we go that direction. So that we then kind of cover the whole question as best as we can.
Sure, I appreciate you're trying to get as many questions out there as possible, but then somebody at that open house didn't get the opportunity to understand that at the next open house.
And part of the reason I'm being specific now with this additional information is that we've been advising folks, here's how you can continue to be involved. Here's how you can continue to write comment. So we had a number of individuals who said, well, we want to put something on a sticky note. We want to provide some additional comment, but we're not quite sure what we want to say. So in those cases, we were saying to them, well, then just email it to us afterwards. Or if, you know, we had one landowner that had a booklet of information. And we said, well, you can leave the booklet with us, but definitely email a PDF of that to us so that we have a record of it as well. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Basie?
No, nothing, your worship. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your work on that project so far. You're doing it the right way, step by step. Good. Okay, council, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Okay. Okay, item 7, anything under item 7, clerk?
No items at this time.
And number 8, any correspondence required this time?
No action required, no.
All right, let's go to item 9 on the agenda. Thank you. I have a motion by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by Councillor Van Claveren. Correspondence items A to C related to recommended reading and routine approval and information items not otherwise addressed by resolution be noted as received by the Plympton-Wyoming Council and filed accordingly. We have 3 items. Council, you've had a chance to review them. We have a couple members, Committee of Adjustment here. If there's any questions for them. Is there anything that anybody'd like to pull or address? Councillor Wolvet?
I think guidance on permitted uses in prime agricultural areas, and I guess what I'm going to speak about is specifically food. If they're selling food or making meals, or selling meat or anything like that, what kind of responsibility does the municipality have? Or is that passed on to the health unit, especially people to determine all that? Because I don't think we go out onto farms as a committee of adjustment or council or anything, doing them kind of inspections, fire inspections, all the stuff that's required by any business or restaurant. Who regulates that and who tells them you decided to set up a restaurant on your farm or whatever? Who tells them those specs, what they have to have?
I think that would come through planning and also the building services, would it not? Melanson?
Thank you, your worship. Yes, that's correct. So likely a planning approval wouldn't necessarily be needed, since most of these types of businesses would be additional to an agricultural use, but certainly building permits would be required. That's where building services would likely kick in to have a conversation with your fire services. There would be a public health approval. I'm sorry, I don't know whether it would be part of the building permit itself, but I would assume so. So that's, those processes are covered off.
So it would come kind of under the same direction, like as the wedding venues out there. Everybody kind of gets involved, fire, building.
So, through your worship, part of the reason that OMAFRA sent this around was in light of the province's draft provincial planning statement. And I get the impression that in light of the agricultural severance policy and the rather adamant response of the agricultural community, OMAFRA wanted to kind of turn things down a couple of notches on the agricultural side of the new PPS and say, well, okay, the province has backed off on that, but we're not really changing much of anything else in the PPS. And here's the guidelines that help us to promote agricultural diversity of uses. So, you know, the idea that if you're growing grapes, you can and have a winery, that you can also have a tasting room where you could have a restaurant, farm to table, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's.
Anything else, council? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, new business. We'll start on my right, Councillor Basie.
Nothing under new business for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rodriguez,
Nothing figured.
I left. Deputy Mayor,
Nothing right now.
Councillor Van Claveren,
Nothing for me, sir.
Councillor Willett.
Nothing for me, sir.
I have a couple items. First of all, I received a letter from a local businessman who's trying to build a shed at 510 Main Street. And he was delayed due to a site plan issue, and he paid a check in May. He's told me that it hasn't cleared yet. And I believe he was dealing with a former planner that we utilized here. Mr. Sabansky, did they speak to you about that?
Through the worship, your worship, if I may. I have not spoken to the noted property owner in regards to the uncashed check. Myself and planning will follow up on that for sure. I do know that planning did just send out a letter to the property owner in regards to the items outstanding to complete the site plan application. That had been delayed because the previous planner on the file was no longer with us. So our current planning team had to pick up the information, review it and reissue it. So I do know that was provided, I think, last week or the week before. But we will check with our staff to see where that check is. And hopefully we can, it's in the correct places and it can be processed immediately.
Ms. Flynn?
If I may add on to that, standard practice is normally we hold the check until the application's declared complete. So because he received that incomplete application letter, we don't cash the money in case, in the event, what we're asking is too taxing or too demanding on them, and they don't want to proceed with the application, we return the money back. So if he received a complete application letter, it would be cashed at that time.
So basically, Mr. Melanson, you're gonna follow up with that?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll get back to the right businessmen and share that with them.
Sorry, Your Worship, just to add, we did in sending the letter advise him that if he had questions to reach out to us to arrange a meeting.
Do you know when that letter went out, Mr. Melanson?
I think Mr. Sabansky is right. It was about 2 weeks ago.
I'll
A quick email scan might have an exact date for you in a second.
So if there's yes, Mr. Sabansky.
The letter was emailed to the property owner on the 13th of July.
And who should he follow up with?
All of the correspondence related to planning is being copied to both Randy and myself, as well as Adam. So he can simply, that particular property owner can reply all and make sure that he gets a response.
I will leave that for you guys to handle. I will step back out of it, but I just want to make sure that it's happening. It's being done. Okay, the second thing I have, when a neighboring municipality puts up welcome to their community. I happened to go down Churchill today, and I'm not sure that Sarnia has taken over part of Plympton-Wyoming, but I did notice a sign probably a good 1,000 to 1,500 feet east of Mandamin with the Sarnia sign on it. Did I miss something, or you see that as well?
Yeah, it's on the other side of Harris's,
Yeah.
east side.
So the county and the city of Sarnia did briefly consult with us. It is a county road allowance technically, so we only had notice and brief discussion. They could not put it on their side of the road because of the Enbridge infrastructure under the roadway there did not allow a sign to be placed there. So they did ask the county if they could put it in the road allowance just on our side of Churchill line leading into the city of Sarnia, as there was no Enbridge pipeline on that side of the road.
It's considerable a ways back.
I was not aware it was that far back.
You may want to do a road trip, Mr. Savansky, and see, or do we just get rent from Sarnia for that?
Unfortunately, I think the county of Lambton would get rent since it is a county of Lambton roadway, but
We should get a percentage, I would
It's
think.
in our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That is- So what if there's a pipeline? Find another way.
Nice. Her neighbor.
I just found that very odd. Okay, and nobody else has anything on new business? Yes.
We're bringing up the placards. So the Plympton-Wyoming ones. So I noticed the Kamlaki ones. Is there any other small placards? Is there like one for Wyoming too? Or?
Talking about the signs, welcome
Yes.
to them. Yes, Wyoming has them on both ends. So you probably go by at a considerable rate of speed.
Probably.
Tunnel drag.
They're this, I guess my question was, do they have any, are they the same as Kamlaki's, the same design?
Yes, I believe they came from the same manufacturer. I
Like
believe.
at the base, because the bigger ones don't have these built up like garden bed things or something like Kamlaki's do. Does Wyoming's have the built up garden? bed?
Yes, they do. But deputy, would you like
No,
to?
the basis was was provided by the United Church people. We put flowers in. So,
In the Kamlaki ones?
yeah,
Oh.
Wyoming here is done by.
Just stone.
As far as I know.
They're just stone.
Yeah, but it was.
So somebody keeping those Kamlaki ones up then?
Maybe
They don't look.
Maybe they decided not to do it this year. I don't know.
Well, I wasn't complaining. I was just suggesting that if nobody is doing anything with them, I would think stone might be appropriate as well.
Sure. I thought they looked pretty good a little while ago, but then maybe the weeds have come up because of all this rain we've been getting.
Yeah,
Doing the same thing in my garden.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know if there was, that's all. Thank you.
All right. I guess at this time, we're going to close. I have a motion. It should be 11. It's okay. We can.
That's this one on camera.
So we have a motion by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by Councillor Van Claveren, that the council move into an in-camera meeting of council pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 is amended for the following reasons. Item A, personal matters, section 239, bracket 2, bracket B, personal matters about an identifiable individual. And item B, employee matters, section 239, bracket 2, bracket D, labor relations or employee negotiations. Council, you've heard that motion. All those in favor? Carried. For those that are joining us virtually, who thank you for being with us, we're going to go in camera. Probably back out within the hour. Sign off for